In the gleaming corridors of Nexus Industries, a 56-year-old night janitor was about to witness corporate catastrophe. What started as routine cleaning took a shocking turn when she came face to face with a $2.8 billion quantum computing system dying before her eyes. Dallas Joyce wasn't your typical maintenance worker. For 20 years, she had spent her life in the Army Signal Corps, known for keeping critical communications alive under Taliban fire. When she encountered the quantum cores failing during a Pentagon demonstration, she had no idea she was walking into corporate sabotage. Dallas recognized systematic patterns that would lead to complete destruction of America's most advanced military technology. What began as invisible janitorial work would become corporate salvation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The quantum cores hummed with an almost musical resonance, their crystalline chambers pulsing with ethereal blue light that painted the demonstration room in shifting patterns. Marcus Kane stood at the presentation podium, his custom-tailored suit immaculate, his voice carrying the confident authority of a man who had transformed silicon and ambition into a billion-dollar empire. General Hayes, distinguished colleagues. Marcus gestured toward the towering quantum processing array. What you're witnessing represents the future of secure military communications. Project Prometheus can process encrypted battlefield data at speeds that make conventional systems look like smoke signals. The Pentagon delegation sat in the front row of the secure demonstration facility, their expressions carefully neutral. General Patricia Hayes, her silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun, leaned forward slightly as the quantum display showed real-time encryption processing rates that defied traditional computing limitations. Behind the glass partition separating the observation area from the quantum core chamber, Dr. Carla Rojas monitored her systems with the focused intensity of someone whose career hung in the balance. Her dark eyes tracked dozens of data streams. Across multiple monitors, her fingers dancing across haptic interfaces with practiced precision. 3 years of 18-hour days had led to this moment. The system is currently processing 1,000 simultaneous encryption protocols. Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the hushed room, each one representing the kind of battlefield communications that could save lives in hostile environments. In the corridor beyond the demonstration room, Dallas Joyce guided her industrial cleaning cart with the methodical precision of someone who had learned to remain invisible in spaces where important people made important decisions. Her weathered hands gripped the cart's handle with steady strength, though her trained ears caught every technical detail drifting through the partially open doors. 20 years in the Army Signal Corps had taught her to recognize the sound of complex communications equipment under stress. The quantum core's harmonic resonance carried a subtle dissonance that reminded her of battlefield radio arrays pushed beyond their operational parameters. Now, General Hayes, Marcus's voice rose with theatrical confidence, I'd like to demonstrate our system's ability to maintain quantum entanglement even under direct cyberatic simulation. Dallas paused in her cleaning, her military instincts triggered by something in the room's acoustics. The quantum core's humming had shifted. Not dramatically, most people wouldn't notice, but her years maintaining communications equipment in combat zones had trained her to hear the difference between stable operation and impending failure. Dr. Rojas's fingers flew across her interfaces as warning indicators began cascading across her displays. Yellow alerts shifted to amber, then orange. Her breath caught as she recognized patterns that shouldn't exist in a properly functioning quantum system. Marcus, she called through the intercom, her voice tight with controlled alarm. We're seeing anomalous readings in the entanglement matrices. Marcus maintained his smile, though his eyes flickered toward the glass partition. Minor fluctuations are normal during high-stress operations, General. Our system is designed to The quantum core's harmonious hum shattered into a discordant shriek that raised goosebumps along Dallas's arms. She'd heard that sound before electronics. Dying under hostile fire, communications arrays collapsing when soldiers desperately needed them most. Warning klaxons erupted throughout the facility as every screen in the demonstration room flashed red. The ethereal blue light of the quantum cores flickered, strobed, then died completely. Emergency lighting bathed the room in harsh white illumination that stripped away the technological magic, revealing the stark reality of catastrophic system failure. What the hell? General Hayes was on her feet, her military bearings shifting into crisis mode. Marcus stared at the dark quantum array, his confident facade crumbling like poorly mixed concrete. 15 years of building Nexus Industries, of transforming himself from a garage startup dreamer into a Silicon Valley icon, and it was collapsing in front of the Pentagon's most influential decision-makers. Dr. Rojas, he barked into his headset, his voice cracking slightly. Status report, now. Through the glass partition, Carla could be seen surrounded by her team of engineers, their faces illuminated by the hellish glow of error messages flooding their displays. Her voice came through the intercom with barely controlled panic. Complete system failure. All quantum processing cores are offline. The entanglement verification protocols have collapsed across the entire network. Victoria Sterling materialized in the demonstration room's doorway like a shark scenting blood in the water. Her platinum hair was perfectly styled despite the emergency, her expression calculating as she assessed the disaster unfolding before her. She owned 15% of Nexus Industries and had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Marcus, her voice carried the dangerous silk of a predator closing in. Perhaps we should adjourn this demonstration and convene an emergency board meeting. General Hayes approached the podium where Marcus stood frozen, his face pale beneath the harsh emergency lighting. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded troops in actual life or death situations. Mr. Kane, this system was supposed to handle classified military communications. The security implications of this failure are significant, Marcus finished, his throat dry. General, I assure you, this is an isolated incident. My team will have the system restored within. Your team, General Hayes interrupted, just demonstrated that your quantum computing system can fail catastrophically without warning. That's not acceptable for military applications. Jake Morrison, Nexus's head of security, appeared at the general's shoulder. His military bearing was immediately recognizable to Dallas, who watched from the corridor shadows. Former Air Force security forces, she judged from his posture and the way his eyes continuously swept for threats. General, we need to secure this facility immediately. Morrison's voice carried the crisp efficiency of military protocol. Until we understand what caused this failure, we have to consider the possibility of hostile action. In the corridor, Dallas felt her chest tighten. The combination of flashing alarms, shouting voices, and the acrid smell of overheated electronics triggered memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. An IED explosion in Kandahar. Electronics screaming as communications failed. 3 soldiers under her command calling for backup that never came. She forced herself to breathe, to focus on the present. But her trained mind continued analyzing what she'd witnessed. The quantum system's failure patterns were too systematic, too coordinated. In her experience, equipment didn't die that comprehensively unless someone wanted it to. Dr. Rojas, General Hayes's voice cut through the chaos. How long to determine the cause of this failure? Carla's response came through the intercom, her voice strained with exhaustion and professional panic. Unknown, General. We're looking at complete quantum decoherence across all processing matrices. The diagnostic systems are showing failures in subsystems that should be physically isolated from each other. Marcus felt the weight of his life's work collapsing around him. The $2.8 billion defense contract that would secure Nexus's future was evaporating in real time. His carefully constructed image as Silicon Valley's golden boy was shattering under the harsh reality of technological failure. Victoria Sterling's smile was razor-thin as she approached the group of Pentagon officials. General Hayes, perhaps. It would be prudent to consider whether Nexus Industries is truly prepared for contracts of this magnitude. Dallas retreated deeper into the corridor shadows, her cleaning cart forgotten. The familiar sensation of being invisible in places where powerful people made decisions that affected countless lives settled over her like a well-worn coat. But this time, her invisibility came with knowledge that might be crucial. She'd heard the quantum cores die. She'd recognized the patterns. And 20 years of military communications experience told her that what happened in that room wasn't an accident. As chaos erupted around the failed demonstration, Dallas Joyce retreated to continue her night shift, her mind already working through the technical implications of what she'd witnessed. Behind her, the most important contract in Nexus Industries' history lay in ruins, but she'd absorbed information that would prove vital to understanding why. The illusion of corporate invincibility had shattered. Now the real work would begin. The illusion of corporate invincibility had shattered. Now the real work would begin. Dallas pushed her cleaning cart through the empty corridors of Nexus Industries, the facility's emergency lighting casting harsh shadows that reminded her too much of forward operating bases under attack. 24 hours had passed since the quantum system's catastrophic failure, and the building hummed with a different kind of energy desperation disguised as determination. Through conference room windows, she could see clusters of engineers, hunched over laptops, their faces illuminated by screens showing endless cascades of error logs. The comfortable arrogance that typically permeated Nexus's halls had been replaced by something more primal, the fear of institutional death. Absolutely unacceptable, Victoria Sterling's voice carried through the boardroom supposedly soundproof walls as Dallas emptied wastebaskets nearby. Marcus, your leadership has brought us to the brink of disaster. The Pentagon has given us 72 hours to restore system functionality or the contract is terminated. Dallas paused in her work, 72 hours. In military terms, that was barely enough time to establish basic communications, let alone resurrect a quantum computing system that had died so comprehensively. Through the glass partition, she could see Marcus Kane slumped in his chair, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. The confidence that had carried him through 15 years of Silicon Valley success had evaporated, leaving behind a man confronting his first real failure. The media is calling it the Nexus disaster, Victoria continued, her tablet displaying headlines that would make any CEO's blood run cold. TechCrunch, Wired, The Wall Street Journal, they're all questioning whether we've oversold our capabilities. Dr. Carla Rojas's voice crackled through the conference room speakers, transmitted from the quantum lab where she'd been working without sleep for the past day. Victoria, we're dealing with quantum decoherence patterns that shouldn't be possible under normal operational parameters. This isn't a simple debugging exercise. Dallas recognized the exhaustion in Carla's voice. She'd heard it in her own team's communications during extended operations in Afghanistan, when complex equipment failed and lives hung in the balance. But there was something else, a defensive brittleness that suggested Carla was taking the failure personally. Normal parameters, Victoria's laugh carried no humor, clearly don't apply to Nexus anymore. General Hayes made it quite clear that the Pentagon views this failure as a fundamental breach of contract. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hollow. Hayes called me personally this morning. She's recommending an immediate security review of all our classified projects. If we can't restore system functionality. He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Dallas continued her methodical cleaning, But her military-trained mind was analyzing fragments of technical conversation drifting from various offices. Quantum entanglement protocol failures, verification matrix corruption, systematic decoherence across isolated processing nodes. In her experience with battlefield communications, equipment failed in predictable patterns. Power loss, environmental damage, component fatigue all left distinctive signatures. But what she'd witnessed during the demonstration showed patterns that reminded her of something else entirely: deliberate interference. Ms. Joyce. Dallas turned to find Tommy Reeves approaching, his weathered face creased with concern. Her supervisor had worked his way up from janitor to facilities manager over 25 years at Nexus, and his institutional knowledge made him one of the few people who truly understood how the company functioned beneath its glossy corporate surface. "You've been working extra hours," Tommy observed, his voice carrying the protective tone of someone who looked after his people. "Everything all right?" Dallas considered her response. Tommy was one of the few people at Nexus who treated maintenance staff like human beings rather than invisible service providers. But explaining why she'd been lingering near the quantum labs would require revealing knowledge she wasn't supposed to possess. "Just thorough," she replied, her voice carrying the measured calm she'd perfected during her military service. "Lots of activity in the building. Want to make sure everything stays clean." Tommy's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd been watching Dallas for months, noting her unusual attention to technical details, the way she moved through the building with tactical awareness rather than simple cleaning efficiency. There was more to her than appeared on the surface. "You hear things moving around the building at night," Tommy said carefully. "Technical things. You ever work with computers before this job?" The question hit closer to home than Dallas was comfortable with. "Some," she replied, which was technically true. 20 years of military communication systems certainly qualified as some computer experience. Down the hallway, Jake Morrison emerged from the security office, his expression grim. Dallas recognized the purposeful stride of someone who'd discovered something important. His investigation into potential security breaches was yielding results. "Tommy," Morrison called out as he approached them, "I need to review access logs for the quantum lab sector. Past 30 days. Something specific you're looking for?" Tommy asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Morrison glanced at Dallas, his security training making him cautious about discussing sensitive matters in front of non-essential personnel. But necessity was overriding protocol throughout the building. "Internal network traffic shows unusual patterns in the weeks leading up to the demonstration," Morrison explained. "Someone with administrative privileges was accessing systems they shouldn't have been touching." Dallas felt her pulse quicken. Internal sabotage. It confirmed what her instincts had been telling her since she'd heard the quantum cores die. "I'll get you those logs," Tommy replied. "Might take a few hours to compile everything." "Make it fast," Morrison said, already moving toward the elevators. "We're running out of time." As Morrison disappeared into the elevator, Tommy turned back to Dallas. "You know, in my experience, people who pay attention to details sometimes notice things others miss." Dallas met his gaze, recognizing an invitation to share information. But 20 years of military service had taught her the value of operational security. Information revealed at the wrong time to the wrong people could be more dangerous than helpful. "I noticed the building's been busy," she said carefully. "Lots of people working late. Equipment running harder than usual." Tommy nodded slowly. "Yeah, and equipment that runs too hard sometimes breaks in unexpected ways." Through the corridor windows, Dallas could see Dr. Rojas's team still hunched over their workstations, their movements carrying the frustrated intensity of people trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Traditional debugging methods were failing because they were looking for conventional problems. But Dallas knew this wasn't conventional. The quantum system's death had been too complete, too systematic. Someone had wanted it to fail, and they'd succeeded beyond their probable intentions. As Tani headed back to his office to compile the access logs Morrison needed, Dallas resumed her cleaning routine. But her mind was no longer focused on maintaining the building's appearance. Instead, she was analyzing patterns, connecting technical fragments she'd overheard, and drawing on 20 years of experience with communication systems under attack. Somewhere in this building was evidence of deliberate sabotage. And despite her desire to remain invisible, Dallas was beginning to realize that her unique combination of technical knowledge and tactical training might be the key to finding it. The 72-hour deadline was already ticking away. Soon, she might have to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed anonymity and using her skills to save a company that didn't even know she existed. The 72-hour deadline was already ticking away. Soon, she might have to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed anonymity and using her skills to save a company that didn't even know she existed. Dallas found herself cleaning the same stretch of hallway for the third time, her hands moving automatically while her mind processed the technical fragments she'd been gathering. The Quantum Lab's glass walls offered glimpses of Dr. Rojas's team working with increasing desperation, their theoretical approaches failing against a problem that demanded practical battlefield experience. "This doesn't make sense," David Kim's voice carried through the lab's open door as Dallas passed. The young developer sat surrounded by printouts and empty energy drink cans, his Stanford education clearly inadequate for the crisis at hand. The entanglement verification protocols should be isolated from the main processing matrices. There's no theoretical pathway for cascade failure like this. Dallas paused, her military instincts recognizing the frustration of someone approaching a problem from the wrong angle. In Afghanistan, she'd seen communications specialists fail to restore radio networks because they'd been trained to think in terms of ideal conditions rather than hostile environments. "Theoretical," she murmured under her breath, remembering her Signal Corps instructor's favorite saying, "Theory works in theory, but reality works in reality." David looked up from his workstation, catching sight of Dallas through the open doorway. "Sorry, did you say something?" For a moment, Dallas considered retreating into her carefully maintained invisibility. But something in the young man's expression, the open curiosity combined with genuine frustration, reminded her of junior communications specialists she'd mentored during her military service. "Just theoretical approaches sometimes miss practical vulnerabilities," she said, immediately regretting the words as they left her mouth. David's eyebrows rose. The night janitor wasn't supposed to understand quantum computing terminology, let alone offer technical observations. What kind of practical vulnerabilities? Dallas felt the familiar tension between self-preservation and duty. Her PTSD counselor had encouraged her to avoid high-stress situations that might trigger episodes. But watching talented people fail at problems she could solve was its own kind of torture. "Entanglement protocols," she said carefully, stepping slightly into the lab. "In military communications, we learned that isolated systems aren't really isolated if they share power sources, environmental controls, or timing synchronization." David stared at her, his mind clearly racing. "You worked in military communications?" "Some," Dallas replied, which was becoming her standard deflection. 20 years in Signal Corps, battlefield radio networks, encrypted communications, that kind of thing. The lab's other engineers had stopped their work, drawn by the unusual conversation. Dr. Rojas emerged from behind a bank of quantum processing units, her exhaustion evident, but her scientific curiosity piqued. "You're saying the quantum cores could be compromised through shared infrastructure?" Rojas asked, her tone professionally skeptical, but not dismissive. Dallas felt her chest tighten as multiple pairs of eyes focused on her. The attention triggered. Memories of briefing rooms where her assessments had meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and these weren't soldiers depending on her expertise. In hostile environments, she managed, attackers target shared dependencies. You compromise timing systems, power regulation, environmental controls. Suddenly your isolated systems aren't isolated anymore. Jake Morrison's voice cut through the conversation from the lab's entrance. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from sensitive equipment." Dallas turned to face Nexus's security chief, recognizing the protective instincts of someone who'd spent years safeguarding classified operations. Morrison's military bearing was unmistakable: Air Force security forces. She judged from his posture and the way he positioned himself to control the room's exit. "Mr. Morrison," David interjected, "she might be onto something." "The quantum cores share environmental and timing systems with." "She's maintenance staff," Morrison interrupted, though his eyes were studying Dallas with professional interest. Something about her bearing, the way she'd positioned herself in the room, suggested military training. "This is a classified project." Dallas met Morrison's gaze directly, a calculated risk that revealed more about herself than she'd intended. Her military posture, the way she held eye contact without challenge or submission, immediately registered with someone trained to recognize such things. "Air Force security forces," she observed quietly. "Probably overseas deployments. You recognize military bearing when you see it." Morrison's expression shifted from suspicion to professional assessment. "Army Signal Corps, you said. What years?" 2001 to 2021, Dallas replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd earned their rank through performance rather than politics. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. Communications and encryption specialist. The lab fell. Silent as the implications settled, Dr. Rojas stepped forward, her scientific mind overriding social hierarchy when faced with potential solutions. "Master Sergeant Joyce," she said, correctly guessing Dallas's final rank, based on years of service and technical specialization. "If you're right about shared infrastructure vulnerabilities, how would you test that theory?" Dallas felt the familiar weight of technical responsibility settling over her shoulders. It was the same feeling she'd experienced countless times in combat zones, when equipment failures threatened mission success. But this time, the stakes were corporate rather than life and death. "Timing synchronization," she said, her voice gaining confidence as she moved into familiar territory. "Military quantum communications require precise timing coordination between processing nodes. If someone compromised the master timing servers, they could introduce systematic phase errors that would cascade through the entire entanglement network." David's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The cesium atomic clocks. They synchronize all quantum processing across the facility." Dr. Rojas was already moving toward her workstation, her fingers flying across haptic interfaces as she pulled up timing system diagnostics. "I haven't checked the clock synchronization log since the failure. We assumed that timing systems were stable." Morrison stepped closer to Dallas, his security training warring with recognition of potentially valuable intelligence. "Ma'am, if you have insights into this failure, I need you to share everything you know. This is a matter of national security." The phrase national security hit Dallas like a physical blow, triggering memories of briefings where her technical assessments had influenced strategic decisions. The familiar pressure of responsibility, combined with the stress of exposure, threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained emotional control. Tommy Reeves appeared in the lab's doorway, drawn by reports of unusual activity. His protective instincts activated immediately when he saw Dallas surrounded by executives and technical staff. "Dallas," he said, his voice carrying both support and concern. "Everything all right here?" Dr. Rojas looked up from her diagnostics, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. Tommy, your night shift employee just identified a potential attack vector that my entire team missed. The timing synchronization logs show systematic phase drift starting 3 weeks before the demonstration. Marcus Kane's voice came through. The lab's intercom system, summoned by reports of a breakthrough. Dr. Rojas, what's the status on diagnostics? The board is demanding answers. Rojas glanced at Dallas, recognition dawning that the night janitor possessed technical knowledge. That could save not just the project, but the entire company. Marcus, I think you need to come down to the lab. We may have found our saboteur's methodology. Dallas felt the walls of her carefully constructed anonymity crumbling around her. Within minutes, she'd gone from invisible maintenance worker to central figure in a corporate crisis. The attention, the pressure, the weight of technical responsibility all combined to trigger the anxiety responses she'd been managing since Afghanistan. But as she watched Dr. Rojas's team begin analyzing timing system vulnerabilities with renewed purpose, Dallas realized her choice had already been made. Her expertise was needed, and despite her personal cost, she couldn't walk away from a problem she was uniquely qualified to solve. The intersection between her hidden past and Nexus's crisis had been reached. Now she would have to navigate the consequences. The intersection between her hidden past and Nexus's crisis had been reached. Now she would have to navigate the consequences. Marcus Kane arrived in the quantum lab with the hurried stride of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. His usually immaculate appearance showed signs of strain-wrinkled shirt, loosened tie, the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone who'd spent 36 hours watching 15 years of work disintegrate. Dr. Rojas, he began, then stopped as he noticed the unusual assembly in his lab. His night janitor stood among his top engineers and security personnel, her weathered hands clasped behind her back in military parade rest. What exactly is happening? Here. Marcus, meet Master Sergeant Dallas Joyce, Dr. Rojas said, her scientific excitement overriding corporate protocols. 20 years Army Signal Corps, 3 combat deployments, and she's identified how our quantum system was sabotaged. Marcus's expression cycled through confusion, skepticism, and desperate hope. Sabotaged, you're certain? David Kim pulled up displays showing timing synchronization logs, his young enthusiasm barely contained. Dallas Master Sergeant Joyce identified systematic phase drift in our cesium atomic clocks. Someone with administrative access introduced micro delays that accumulated over 3 weeks, designed to cause cascade failure during high-stress operations. Dallas watched Marcus process this information, recognizing the moment when corporate hierarchy collided with operational necessity. She'd seen it countless times in military settings, officers forced to accept intelligence from unexpected sources because the situation demanded it. The timing servers are physically isolated, Marcus said, grasping for explanations that didn't involve internal betrayal. How could external attackers? They couldn't, Jake Morrison interrupted, his security training leading him to conclusions that Marcus wasn't ready to face. This required someone with administrative privileges and detailed knowledge of our quantum processing architecture. Dallas felt her chest tighten as the conversation moved into territory that would force her to reveal more classified knowledge than she was comfortable sharing. But the technical evidence was leading toward conclusions that her military experience had already reached. In battlefield communications, she said carefully, timing attacks are preferred by sophisticated adversaries because they're nearly undetectable until catastrophic failure occurs. The phase drift would have been within normal operational tolerances right up until the demonstration. Dr. Rojas nodded grimly, which explains why our diagnostic systems didn't flag any problems. The sabotage was designed to remain hidden until maximum damage could be achieved. Victoria Sterling's voice echoed through the lab's intercom system. Marcus, the board is convening an emergency session in 20 minutes. We need answers about the Pentagon contract. Marcus rubbed His temples, the weight of corporate politics adding pressure to an already impossible situation. Dr. Rojas, can we restore system functionality with this information? That depends, Rojas replied, her eyes on Dallas. Master Sergeant, in your experience with communication systems under attack, what's the recovery timeline for this type of sabotage? Dallas felt the familiar weight of technical responsibility settling over her shoulders, but this time it was accompanied by psychological pressure that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained emotional control. The lab's bright lights, the urgency in everyone's voices, the critical nature of the technical decisions, all combined to trigger memories of forward operating bases where her assessments meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her hands began to shake slightly, a tremor she recognized as the beginning of a PTSD episode. But the technical problem demanded her attention, and years of military discipline forced her to push through the psychological distress. Recovery depends on whether they compromise just timing systems or deeper quantum architecture. She managed, her voice steady despite the internal turmoil. If it's just timing, we can rebuild synchronization protocols. But if they corrupted the entanglement verification algorithms, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. David's fingers flew across his workstation, pulling up deeper system diagnostics. The entanglement matrices show systematic corruption patterns. It's not just timing, someone rewrote core verification protocols. Morrison stepped closer too. The displays, his security training focused on identifying the scope of the breach. How many people have the access privileges necessary for this level of sabotage? Dr. Rojas consulted her administrative systems, her expression growing more concerned. 17 people have level 5 quantum systems access. That includes my entire senior engineering team, plus 3 network administrators and myself. Dallas recognized the patterns emerging from the investigation. In military intelligence, this type of systematic sabotage typically involved someone with legitimate access who'd been compromised or turned. The sophistication suggested either extensive training or inside knowledge of system vulnerabilities. The timing, she observed, her military training overriding her psychological distress. 3 weeks of gradual compromise, time to fail during the Pentagon demonstration. That suggests someone who knew the demonstration schedule and understood the political implications of failure. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the implications became clear. You're saying someone inside Nexus deliberately destroyed our most important contract? The evidence suggests internal sabotage, Morrison confirmed, his voice carrying the grim authority of someone delivering bad news to commanders. Ma'am, he addressed Dallas directly, in your military experience, what would motivate this type of betrayal? Dallas felt the question hit her like a physical blow. Betrayal. The word triggered memories of Afghan interpreters who'd sold intelligence to Taliban forces, of trusted team members who'd compromised operations for money or ideology. The psychological weight of those experiences, combined with the current crisis, threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained emotional stability. Her breathing became shallow, her vision slightly tunneled. The classic onset of a panic attack, brought on by the combination of high stress and traumatic memories. But the technical problem still demanded her expertise, and she fought to maintain focus. Financial motivation, she said, her voice tight with controlled distress. Ideology. Blackmail. Sometimes people feel overlooked, undervalued. They convince themselves the organization deserves what happens. Dr. Rojas was studying the access logs with increasing alarm. Marcus, we need to consider that whoever did this might still be actively sabotaging our recovery efforts. They could be monitoring our progress, ready to introduce new failures. Victoria Sterling's voice crackled through the intercom again. More urgent now. Marcus, General Hayes is on line 1. She wants an immediate status update, or she's recommending contract termination. Marcus looked around the lab at the faces of his people engineers, security personnel, and now an Army veteran who'd emerged from the shadows to offer expertise he desperately needed. The comfortable hierarchy that had built his company was proving inadequate for the crisis at hand. "Master Sergeant Joyce," he said formally, "I don't know why you've been working as a janitor when you clearly possess technical expertise we need, but I'm asking for your help. Not as an employee, but as someone who understands how to fight back against this kind of attack." Dallas felt the weight of the moment settling over her. Her carefully constructed anonymity was gone. Her desire to remain invisible in a civilian world that had little use for her skills had been shattered by operational necessity. But watching talented people struggle with problems she was uniquely qualified to solve had become its own kind of torture. "I'll help," she said quietly, though. Her hands continued to shake with the onset of trauma response. "But we need to work fast. If someone's monitoring our recovery efforts, they'll escalate their sabotage when they realize we've identified their methodology." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we need to identify the saboteur before they realize we're onto them." The revelation was complete. The quantum system's failure had been deliberate, sophisticated, and executed by someone with intimate knowledge of Nexus's most sensitive systems. But identifying the methodology was only the beginning. Now they had to catch the saboteur before they could strike again, all while Dallas struggled to maintain her psychological stability under the weight of unwanted responsibility. The real hunt was about to begin. The real hunt was about to begin. Dallas clutched the edge of the lab table as another wave of anxiety surged through her, the overhead fluorescence pulsing in sync with her racing heartbeat. But even as her body fought to stay calm, her combat-honed instincts took over, analyzing the data through the fog of stress. 2 decades of battlefield experience had taught her how to operate under psychological duress, especially when lives or reputations were on the line. "Pull up the network traffic logs," she said, her voice more stable than she felt. "Administrative access always leaves traces. In the military, we tracked intrusions by spotting irregular data signatures." David Kim brought up the system logs, fast-forwarding through 3 weeks of activity in a compressed timeline. "Here's what's strange," he said. "The attacks weren't random. They followed a pattern almost like someone was probing our defenses, measuring response times before launching the final breach." Jake Morrison leaned in, his eyes scanning the data with practiced precision. "That implies a high degree of planning. Someone studied our systems for weeks, learning how we operate." From behind a wall of humming quantum processors, Dr. Carla Rojas stepped into view. Fatigue lined her face, but her mind was alert finally. There was a tangible lead rather than abstract failure. "The credentials used were legitimate," she reported tightly. "Whoever did this had authorized access. This wasn't an outside cyber attic. It was someone on the inside." Dallas forced her mind to stay focused, drawing on training that helped her suppress emotional responses during high-stakes technical crises. Afghanistan had taught her how to shut down fear in order to fix what was broken. That discipline still applied here. "Compare access logs with staff schedules," she instructed, tapping into her counterintelligence background. "Insiders usually operate during low-visibility windows, late nights, weekends, but their timing always gives them away." Morrison began sifting through personnel data. His face hardened as patterns came into focus. "Most of the suspicious activity happened during off hours," he confirmed. "But there's a key exception. Someone accessed the timing servers during regular hours inside the quantum lab." Dr. Rojas felt a knot form in her stomach. That detail narrowed the list considerably. "Only 5 people have the clearance and technical ability to pull that off," she said grimly. Then Marcus Kane's voice crackled over the intercom, tense and urgent. "Dr. Rojas, General Hayes needs answers now. The Pentagon is threatening To cancel every classified contract we have. The tension in the room skyrocketed. The stakes weren't just professional, they were existential. Nexus Industries faced collapse. Years of research and innovation could be lost in a single scandal. We need a list, Morrison said, his tone clipped and resolute. Everyone with level 5 clearance who was present during the breach window. Rojas hesitated. Loyalty to her team clashed with the pressing need to act, but the evidence was clear. The future of the company depended on exposing whoever was. Behind the sabotage, there are 5, she said quietly. Myself, David Kim, Dr. Sarah Chun from Theoretical Physics, Marcus Kane, and... Her voice faltered. My brother, Alexo. He's a junior network admin, but he's been granted elevated access for quantum system maintenance. Dallas felt a familiar chill, that moment of clarity when a saboteur's identity emerged. In military intelligence, family betrayal was often the most devastating. It weaponized trust. Your brother, she said carefully. How long has he been here? 3 years, Rojas answered, the realization sinking in. He started as an intern during college. I was the one who recommended him. Morrison was already pulling up Alex O's records, scanning for signs of motive and opportunity. Academic record shows exceptional technical capability, but limited advancement within the company. Salary records indicate financial stress, student loans, credit card debt, living expenses in Silicon Valley. David Kim looked up from his workstation, his young idealism struggling with the reality of corporate betrayal. Alex has always been frustrated about advancement opportunities. He's brilliant, but he feels overlooked because he doesn't have an advanced degree like the rest of the senior team. Dallas recognized the psychological profile emerging from the investigation. Resentment, financial pressure, feeling undervalued despite technical competence, classic motivational factors for insider threats. In the military, such individuals were prime targets for enemy recruitment. Check his personal communications, she suggested, her counterintelligence training overriding personal privacy concerns when national security was at stake. If he's been compromised by competitors, there will be evidence of outside contact. Morrison's fingers flew across his security console, accessing communication monitoring systems that few employees knew existed. Personal email shows contact with 3 competitors in the past 6 months. Technical discussions that exceed normal professional networking. Dr. Rojas felt her world tilting as evidence mounted against her younger brother. Professional duty warred with family loyalty. But the technical evidence was undeniable. The timing server access logs, she said quietly, show his credentials accessing critical systems during the exact time frame when the sabotage was implemented. Dallas felt another wave of anxiety as the investigation reached its conclusion. But she forced herself to remain focused on operational requirements. In Afghanistan, identifying enemy infiltrators had been a matter of life and death. Here, it was a matter of corporate survival, but the same principles applied. We need to confront him carefully, she advised, her military experience informing tactical considerations. If he's working with competitors, arresting him might trigger additional sabotage or destruction of evidence. We need to confirm his guilt and identify his outside contacts before taking action. General Patricia Hayes's voice suddenly crackled through the lab's emergency communication system. Dr. Rojas, this is General Hayes. I'm on site for an emergency security assessment. I need immediate access to your facility and all personnel involved in the quantum project. Marcus Kane appeared in the lab doorway, his face pale with the realization that his company was facing not just technical failure, but active investigation by military intelligence. General Hayes is here with a Pentagon security team. They're treating this as a potential breach of classified military technology. Dallas felt the familiar weight of military authority settling over the situation. General Hayes represented The world she'd left behind, the community where her skills had been valued and her service recognized. But it also represented the trauma and responsibility that had driven her to seek anonymity in civilian life. Master Sergeant Joyce, General Hayes's voice carried through the intercom with unmistakable recognition. I've been briefed on your involvement in this investigation. I need to speak with you immediately. The moment Dallas had been dreading since leaving the military had arrived. Her past was colliding with her present, forcing her to choose between the anonymity she'd built and the duty that had defined her life for 20 years. But as she looked around the lab at people whose careers hung in the balance, at technology that could serve national defense if properly protected, Dallas realized her choice had already been made. Alex O's betrayal had threatened not just Nexus Industries, but the broader security of military communications technology. The saboteur had been identified. Now came the harder task of proving his guilt and determining the full scope of the damage. And Dallas would have to face the military community she'd left behind, carrying the weight of her own trauma while helping to resolve a crisis that had national security implications. The hunt was about to become a confrontation. General Patricia Hayes entered the quantum lab with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to command, authority in crisis situations. Her silver hair was pulled back in regulation precision, and her sharp eyes immediately assessed the room's occupants with the tactical awareness of a career military officer who had navigated Pentagon politics and battlefield realities with equal skill. Master Sergeant Joyce, she said, her voice carrying the weight of recognition and respect. It's been a long time since Kandahar. I heard about what happened to your team. Dallas felt her carefully constructed civilian persona crumble under the weight of military acknowledgement. General Hayes had been a colonel then, visiting forward operating bases to assess communications capabilities. She'd been present for the after-action briefing, following the IED attack that had killed 3 soldiers under Dallas's command. General, Dallas replied, her voice automatically assuming military formality despite years of civilian employment. Ma'am, at ease, Sergeant. You're not under my command anymore. Hayes turned to address the room. But you are involved in a situation that has significant national security implications. Dr. Rojas, I understand you've identified the methodology behind your system's failure. Dr. Carla Rojas stepped forward, her scientific training helping her navigate the sudden military presence in her lab. General, we've confirmed deliberate sabotage through timing server compromise. The evidence points to internal betrayal, specifically my brother Alex. Oh, where is Mr. O now? Hayes asked, her tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having questions answered immediately. Jake Morrison consulted his security monitors. In the Network Administration Center, apparently conducting routine maintenance. He hasn't been made aware that we've identified him as a suspect. Hayes nodded approvingly. Good. We'll need to coordinate his apprehension with FBI cybercrime specialists. But first, I need to understand whether your quantum system can be restored. The Pentagon has significant resources invested in this technology. Dallas felt the weight of technical responsibility settling over her as all eyes turned toward her assessment. Despite her desire to remain invisible, her unique combination of military communications experience and quantum systems knowledge made her central to any recovery effort. The sabotage was sophisticated, she began, forcing herself to speak. Despite the anxiety triggered by military attention, Alex O corrupted not just timing synchronization, but the core quantum entanglement verification algorithms. Standard recovery protocols won't work because the system's fundamental architecture has been compromised. Marcus Kane stepped forward, his corporate instincts focused on operational solutions despite the personal cost. What would it take to restore functionality? We have unlimited resources and the Pentagon's full support. Dallas felt her chest tighten as she realized the magnitude of what they were asking. Rebuilding a quantum computing system wasn't just a technical challenge, it required rethinking the fundamental approach to quantum coherence in hostile environments. In military communications, she said, her voice gaining strength as she moved into familiar technical territory, we learned that systems designed for perfect laboratory conditions fail catastrophically under real-world stress. Your quantum cores are elegant, but they're fragile. Dr. Rojas bristled slightly at the implicit criticism of her life's work. Our system was designed according to theoretical quantum mechanics principles. The mathematics are sound. The mathematics assume ideal conditions, Dallas replied, her military experience overriding civilian diplomatic conventions. But hostile actors don't respect theoretical limitations. They exploit practical vulnerabilities that elegant designs often overlook. David Kim looked up from his workstation, his young enthusiasm focused on bridging the gap between theoretical perfection and practical reality. What would a military-hardened quantum system look like? Dallas felt another wave of anxiety, as the question forced her to reveal classified knowledge she wasn't supposed to possess. But the technical challenge demanded expertise that only her unique background could provide. Redundancy, she said, drawing on years of battlefield communications design. Multiple independent timing sources, distributed verification protocols, and graceful degradation under attack. The system should assume it's operating in a hostile environment and design accordingly. General Hayes stepped closer, her military experience recognizing the value of Dallas's unconventional approach. Sergeant, are you suggesting we rebuild the entire quantum architecture? Not rebuild, Dallas clarified, her military training focused on practical solutions under time pressure. Retrofitting. We can salvage the quantum cores and processing matrices, but we need to implement military-grade hardening protocols around them. Dr. Rojas felt her perfectionist instincts warring with desperate necessity. 3 years of elegant theoretical work would be replaced by crude but effective military engineering. But her company's survival depended on accepting Dallas's assessment. How long would such retrofitting take? Marcus asked, his voice tight with the knowledge that every hour of delay brought them closer to contract termination. Dallas felt the familiar pressure of providing tactical assessments under impossible deadlines. In Afghanistan, such estimates had meant the difference between successful operations and catastrophic failure. The same principles applied here. But the stakes were corporate rather than life and death. 72 hours, she said, her military training focused on achievable objectives under crisis conditions. But it requires treating this lab like a battlefield engineering project. No elegant solutions, no theoretical perfection. Just functional systems that can operate under attack. Tommy Reeves appeared in the lab doorway, drawn by reports of military presence and unusual activity. His protective instincts toward Dallas activated immediately when he saw her surrounded by executives and Pentagon officials. "Dallas," he said, his voice carrying both support and concern. "You all right? This looks like a lot of pressure." Dallas felt a wave of gratitude toward the maintenance supervisor who had become her closest civilian friend. But she also felt the weight of expectations from people whose careers and national security depended on her technical expertise. "I'm managing, Tommy," she replied, though her hands showed a slight tremor that indicated rising anxiety. "But this is going to require round-the-clock work and significant changes to how we approach quantum system design," General Hayes observed. The interaction with interest, noting the respect and loyalty Dallas commanded despite her humble position. Military leaders learn to recognize true competence regardless of rank or title. "Sergeant, do you need additional personnel for this retrofitting project?" Hayes asked. "The Pentagon can provide military communications specialists with quantum experience." Dallas felt her PTSD symptoms intensifying as the prospect of working with active military personnel triggered memories of her last deployment, But the technical challenge demanded resources and expertise that civilian staff couldn't provide. "I'll need people who understand both quantum mechanics and battlefield engineering," she said, her voice steady despite internal turmoil. "This isn't theoretical physics, it's combat engineering applied to quantum systems." Dr. Rojas made a decision that would transform not just her company's technology, but her own understanding of practical versus theoretical excellence. "Dallas, I'm officially designating you as technical lead for the recovery project. Whatever you need, whatever resources, whatever authority you have it." Marcus Kane nodded his agreement, recognizing that his company's survival depended on unconventional solutions from an unexpected source. "Master Sergeant Joyce, Nexus Industries is placing its quantum program under your technical authority." Dallas felt the weight of command settling over her shoulders for the first time since leaving the military. It was a familiar burden, but one she'd hoped never to carry again. The responsibility for other people's success or failure, the pressure of making decisions under impossible deadlines, the constant awareness that her expertise could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. But as she looked around the lab at talented people who needed her help, at technology that could serve national defense if properly protected, Dallas realized she couldn't walk away from a problem she was uniquely qualified to solve. The technical challenge was about to begin, and for the first time in years, Dallas Joyce would have to truly lead. The technical challenge was about to begin, and for the first time in years, Dallas Joyce would have to truly lead. The quantum lab transformed overnight into something resembling a forward operating base. Dallas stood at the center of controlled chaos, her military bearing evident as she coordinated teams of civilian engineers, Pentagon contractors, and hastily recalled Nexus personnel. The elegant laboratory had been replaced by functional workstations, backup power systems, and the kind of redundant communications infrastructure she'd implemented in Afghan combat zones. "David, I need you to isolate the quantum cores from the primary power grid," Dallas instructed, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in crisis situations. "We're implementing independent power sources for each processing matrix." David Kim looked up from his workstation, his Stanford education struggling to adapt to Dallas's battlefield engineering approach. "But that violates the theoretical requirements for quantum coherence. Electromagnetic interference from multiple power sources could introduce noise," Dallas finished, her tone patient but firm. "But it also prevents cascade failures when hostile actors compromise primary systems. We accept manageable interference to avoid catastrophic vulnerability." Dr. Carla Rojas watched from her position near the quantum processing units, her perfectionist instincts warring with grudging respect for Dallas's practical approach. 3 years of elegant theoretical work was being replaced by robust but crude military engineering. "This feels like using a sledgehammer where we need a scalpel," Rojas muttered, though without real hostility. "Sometimes sledgehammers work when scalpels fail," Dallas replied, her military experience informing every design decision. "In Afghanistan, I watched elegant communication systems die under attack while crude backups kept operating. Elegance is a luxury we can't afford when people are shooting at you." General Hayes observed the transformation from her position near the lab's entrance, noting how Dallas's leadership style was affecting the civilian workforce. The former Master Sergeant had unconsciously implemented military command structures that were increasing efficiency and reducing the chaos that had characterized earlier recovery efforts. "Sergeant," Hayes called out, "the Pentagon communications team has arrived with the quantum hardening equipment you requested." Dallas felt her pulse quicken as active military personnel entered her civilian workspace. Colonel James Mitchell led a team of Signal Corps specialists, their uniforms and bearing triggering memories of her own service. The familiar sight of military professionals working on technical problems brought both comfort and anxiety. "Colonel Mitchell," Dallas acknowledged, her voice automatically assuming military formality despite years of civilian employment. "Master." "Sergeant Joyce," Mitchell replied, his tone carrying professional respect. "I've been briefed on your retrofitting approach. My team is ready to implement military-grade quantum hardening protocols." The presence of active military personnel in the lab created an interesting dynamic. Dallas found herself functioning as a bridge between two worlds, translating between civilian corporate culture and military operational requirements. Her unique position as someone who understood both environments made her essential to the collaboration. "The civilian team has isolated the quantum cores," Dallas reported, falling back into military briefing protocols. "We're ready to implement distributed timing synchronization and redundant verification systems." Tommy Reeves watched the transformation from his position near the lab's supply stations. Over the past 24 hours, he'd seen Dallas evolve. From a quiet night janitor into a confident technical leader, commanding respect from generals and PhDs alike. But he also noticed signs of strain, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she occasionally paused as if fighting internal battles. "Dallas," he approached during a brief lull in activity, "when's the last time you took a break?" "You've been going for 18 hours straight." Dallas felt gratitude toward Tommy's concern, but the technical timeline demanded continuous attention. "Can't stop now, Tommy. We've got 36 hours to prove this system works, or Nexus loses everything." "And if you collapse from exhaustion, how does that help?" Tommy asked, his protective instincts overriding workplace hierarchy. "Military or civilian, you're still human." The comment hit closer to home than Dallas was comfortable admitting. Her PTSD symptoms were intensifying under the sustained pressure, and the combination of military environments and high-stakes technical work was triggering memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. Marcus Kane appeared at her shoulder, his corporate instincts focused on progress reports, despite his growing respect for Dallas's capabilities. "How are we tracking against timeline?" "On schedule," Dallas replied, though her voice carried the strain of sustained pressure. "The quantum cores are responding well to military hardening protocols. But we need to stress test the entire system before we can guarantee performance under actual attack conditions." Lisa Kane entered the lab with coffee and sandwiches for the exhausted technical teams. Marcus's 17-year-old daughter had been volunteering at the facility since the crisis began, her presence serving as a bridge between her father's corporate world and the working class perspective she'd gained through volunteer work with veterans. "Dad," she said, approaching Marcus and Dallas, "some of the engineers look like they're about to fall over. Maybe you should implement mandatory rest breaks." Dallas observed the interaction between father and daughter, noting how Lisa's presence seemed to humanize Marcus in ways that corporate pressure couldn't achieve. The teenager's casual interaction with both executives and support staff demonstrated an emotional intelligence that most corporate environments lacked. "Your daughter's right," Dallas told Marcus, her military training emphasizing the importance of personnel management during extended operations. "Exhausted people make mistakes. That can destroy weeks of work. We need to implement rotating shifts and mandatory rest periods." Dr. Rojas looked up from her quantum diagnostics, her scientific training agreeing with Dallas's assessment despite her personal desire to work continuously until the crisis was resolved. "I hate to admit it, but the quality of our work has been declining as exhaustion sets in." Victoria Sterling's voice crackled through the lab's communication system, her tone carrying barely concealed hostility. "Marcus, the board is demanding hourly progress reports. Some members are questioning whether this military approach is appropriate for civilian technology." Dallas felt the familiar tension between operational requirements and political considerations. In the military, such interference from non-technical leadership had often complicated mission success. But here, Victoria represented shareholders and board members whose support was necessary for continued funding. "Tell the board," Dallas sighed, her voice carrying quiet authority, "that their quantum system failed catastrophically under standard protocols. Military hardening represents their only viable path to contract fulfillment." Marcus relayed the message, noting how Dallas's confidence was affecting his own leadership style. The former janitor's combination of technical expertise and command presence was transforming not just the quantum system, but the entire corporate culture surrounding the project. As the implementation continued into its second day, Dallas found herself managing not just technical challenges, but the complex interpersonal dynamics of a civilian organization under crisis. Her military leadership training was proving as valuable as her communications expertise, but the sustained pressure was taking a psychological toll she was struggling to hide. The quantum cores were responding to military protocols, but Dallas knew the real test would come when they faced actual hostile action. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she worried that Alex O's sabotage might have deeper implications than anyone yet realized. The implementation was succeeding, but the hardest challenges still lay ahead. 48 hours after beginning the military retrofitting, the quantum lab hummed with a different energy than before the crisis. The elegant theoretical beauty of Dr. Rojas's original design had been replaced by functional redundancy, multiple timing sources, distributed processing nodes, and robust verification protocols that could survive hostile interference. Dallas stood before the main quantum array, her military bearing evident as she prepared for the most critical test of her civilian career. "All stations report ready," David Kim announced from his coordinating position, his voice carrying newfound confidence gained from working alongside military professionals. The young developer had absorbed more practical engineering knowledge in 2 days than his Stanford education had provided in 4 years. General Hayes observed from the secure viewing area alongside Marcus Kane and Dr. Rojas. Their combined attention focused on whether Dallas's unconventional approach could deliver the robust quantum computing capability the Pentagon required. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure would mean not just the loss of a $2.8 billion contract, but the potential collapse of Nexus Industries. "Begin quantum core initialization," Dallas commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had led technical teams through life-and-death situations. The military hardening protocols engaged with mechanical precision, each system checking and cross-verifying its neighbors in a symphony of defensive redundancy. The quantum cores pulsed to life with their familiar blue luminescence, but this time the light seemed steadier, more resilient. Multiple timing sources synchronized in perfect harmony, while distributed verification algorithms monitored each quantum entanglement for signs of interference or attack. "Core synchronization achieving stability," Colonel Mitchell reported from his military communications station. "Quantum coherence holding steady across all processing matrices." Dr. Rojas monitored her diagnostic systems with growing amazement. "I'm seeing quantum processing speeds that match our original theoretical predictions, but with stability margins that exceed anything we achieved before the sabotage." Dallas felt a moment of quiet satisfaction, but her military training kept her focused on the critical phase ahead. "Initiate hostile environment simulation. I want to see how these systems perform under actual attack conditions." The test that followed pushed the quantum cores through scenarios that civilian engineers had never contemplated. Simulated electromagnetic pulse attacks, coordinated timing interference, power grid failures, and network intrusions, all designed to replicate the kind of sophisticated assault that military communication systems faced in combat environments. "Quantum entanglement holding stable through EMP simulation," David reported, his voice filled with excitement. "The distributed verification protocols are compensating for individual node failures automatically." Tommy Reeves watched from the lab's periphery, his institutional knowledge helping him understand that something transformative was occurring. Over 25 years at Nexus, he'd witnessed numerous technological breakthroughs, but this felt different, more fundamental, more resilient. "Dallas," he called out during a brief pause in testing, "you've built something that can survive what killed it in the first place." The comment carried deeper implications than Tommy realized. Dallas had indeed created quantum computing architecture that could function in hostile environments, but she'd also proven that unconventional approaches could solve problems that traditional methods couldn't address. Jake Morrison approached from his security monitoring station, his expression grave despite the technical success. "We've completed the investigation into Alex O's activities. The scope of his betrayal extends beyond just the quantum system sabotage." Dallas felt her chest tighten as additional complications emerged. What else did he compromise? "Financial data, personnel records, strategic planning documents," Morrison reported. "He's been selling Nexus intelligence to competitors for at least 6 months. The quantum sabotage was intended to trigger a hostile takeover that would benefit his external contacts." Marcus Kane felt the blood drain from his face as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "Victoria Sterling. She's been pushing for emergency board action to remove me from leadership. If Alex was feeding information to competitors, the timing isn't coincidental," General Hayes observed, her military intelligence background, recognizing the coordination between internal sabotage and external pressure. "Someone orchestrated this crisis to destabilize your company from multiple angles." Dallas processed this information through her counterintelligence training, recognizing patterns of sophisticated corporate espionage that resembled military operations. "We need to consider that Alex might not be the only internal threat. This level of coordination suggests multiple compromised individuals." Dr. Rojas approached her workstation with growing confidence, her scientific methods now enhanced by Dallas's practical security awareness. "The quantum test results prove our system can resist the type of sabotage Alex implemented. But if there are other threats, then we test against them too," Dallas replied. Her military training focused on comprehensive threat assessment. "In Afghanistan, we learned that successful defense requires anticipating not just known threats, but unknown possibilities." Lisa Kane entered the lab carrying another round of coffee and food for the exhausted teams. Her teenage perspective had proven valuable in bridging generational and cultural gaps between different groups working on the project. "Dad," she said, approaching Marcus with observations that demonstrated emotional intelligence beyond her years, "some of the board members have been asking a lot of questions about Dallas. Personal questions that seem more like background checks than casual interest." The implication was disturbing. If Victoria Sterling was coordinating with external interests to destabilize Nexus, she might be conducting surveillance on Dallas to identify potential leverage or threats to her plans. "General Hayes," Marcus said, his corporate instincts finally aligning with security requirements, "I think we need to expand the FBI investigation beyond Alex. Oh, there may be a broader conspiracy involving board members and external competitors." Hayes nodded approvingly. "That investigation is already underway. But first, we need to complete this quantum system test to prove your technology is viable despite the sabotage attempts." Dallas returned her attention to the technical challenge, though part of her mind remained focused on the broader security implications. The successful test was proving that military hardening could protect quantum systems from sophisticated attacks, but it was also revealing the extent of hostile interest in Nexus's technology. "Final phase," she announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had successfully led teams through impossible challenges. "Full-scale quantum processing under maximum hostile simulation." The next 30 minutes demonstrated the culmination of Dallas's unconventional approach. The quantum cores processed encrypted military communications at Unprecedented speeds while simultaneously resisting every form of attack the military specialists could devise. Timing interference, power fluctuations, network intrusions, electromagnetic pulses, nothing could break the robust architecture that Dallas had implemented. Test complete, Colonel Mitchell reported, his voice carrying professional admiration. System performance exceeds all Pentagon requirements for classified military communications. General Hayes smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Sergeant Joyce, you've not only saved this contract, you've created quantum computing capability that surpasses our original specifications. Dallas felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and anxiety as the technical challenge reached successful conclusion. The test had proven her approach, but it had also thrust her back into the military community she'd left behind. The attention, the responsibility, the weight of other people's expectations, all triggered psychological responses she'd been managing since Afghanistan. But as she looked around the lab at the faces of people whose careers she'd helped save, a technology that would serve national defense, Dallas realized that her exile from purpose was ending. The test had proven more than just quantum system resilience. It had demonstrated that her unique combination of technical expertise and leadership experience had civilian applications she'd never considered. The quantum cores hummed with steady confidence, their blue light painting the lab in patterns of technological triumph. But Dallas knew the real test would come when they deployed the system in actual operational environments. The technical validation was complete. Now came the harder challenge of navigating the personal and professional implications of success. The technical validation was complete. Now came the harder challenge of navigating the personal and professional implications of success. 3 weeks after the successful quantum system test, Dallas sat in an office she'd never imagined occupying, Director of Systems Integration, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Silicon Valley and a view that reminded her daily how far she'd traveled from the night janitor position she'd held just a month earlier. The title felt foreign, the responsibility both thrilling and terrifying. But the work itself drew on skills she'd spent 20 years developing in environments far more challenging than corporate boardrooms. The Pentagon wants to accelerate deployment by 6 months, Dr. Carla Rojas announced as she entered Dallas's office with a stack of technical specifications. Their relationship had evolved from skeptical tolerance to genuine partnership, built on mutual respect for each other's expertise and the shared experience of overcoming an impossible crisis. Dallas looked up from the quantum hardening protocols she'd been refining, her military precision evident in the organized documentation that covered her desk. That's aggressive. The field testing protocols require at least 4 months to validate system performance under actual operational conditions. I know, Carla replied, settling into the chair across from Dallas's desk. But the success of our demonstration has generated interest from other military branches. The Navy wants quantum-hardened communications for submarine operations, and the Air Force is requesting specifications for satellite-based quantum networks. The expansion of their work brought both opportunity and pressure that Dallas felt keenly. Each new application required adapting military hardening principles to different operational environments, drawing on her battlefield experience in ways that civilian engineers couldn't fully comprehend. Tommy Reeves appeared in the office doorway, his weathered face carrying the satisfaction of someone whose instincts about people had been validated. His promotion to facilities manager had come with Dallas's success, representing the kind of advancement that rarely occurred for support staff in traditional corporate environments. Dallas, you've got another interview request, he said, holding up a message tablet. This one's for my EEE Spectrum. They want to do a cover story on military innovation in civilian technology. Dallas felt her chest tighten at the prospect of additional media attention. The transformation from invisible night janitor to technology celebrity had been rapid and overwhelming. conflicting with her preference for anonymity and her ongoing management of PTSD symptoms. "Schedule it for next month," she replied, her voice carrying the strain of someone still learning to navigate public visibility. "I need time to prepare for that level of exposure." Marcus Kane knocked on the office doorframe, his leadership style transformed by the crisis they'd survived together. The arrogant confidence that had characterized his pre-crisis management had been replaced by genuine curiosity about diverse perspectives and a deeper appreciation for the human capital that drove technological innovation. "Dallas, the board meeting is in an hour," he said, though his tone suggested invitation rather than command. "They want to hear your assessment of the military hardening program's expansion potential." The board meetings had become less adversarial. Since Victoria Sterling's departure following the FBI investigation into corporate espionage, her coordination with Alex O and external competitors had been thoroughly documented, resulting in criminal charges and a complete restructuring of Nexus's corporate governance. But Dallas still felt uncomfortable presenting to executives who measured success in quarterly earnings rather than operational effectiveness. "I'll be there," she replied, though her hands showed a slight tremor that indicated rising anxiety. "The technical briefing is ready, but I still struggle with the business presentation aspects." Lisa Kane appeared behind her father, her teenage perspective continuing to serve as a bridge between different organizational cultures. Her internship at Nexus had evolved into a meaningful role helping Dallas navigate corporate communications while developing her own understanding of technologies. Social implications. "Dallas, I've prepared talking points that translate your military experience into business language," Lisa offered, her natural empathy recognizing the challenge Dallas faced in adapting her communication style to corporate audiences. "Want to practice the presentation?" Dallas felt gratitude toward the teenager whose emotional intelligence had proven invaluable in helping her adjust to corporate leadership responsibilities. "That would help. I understand the technology, but explaining its business value still feels foreign." Dr. Rojas observed the interaction with interest, noting how Dallas's leadership style was influencing the entire organization's culture. The former Master Sergeant's emphasis on practical problem-solving over theoretical perfection was spreading throughout the engineering teams, improving both innovation and operational effectiveness. "The Quantum Applications Conference wants you as the keynote speaker," Rojas mentioned, consulting her scheduling tablet. "It's the premier international symposium on quantum computing advancement." Dallas felt the familiar pressure of expectations that exceeded her comfort zone. "Carla, I'm a military communications specialist who learned quantum theory through practical application. Academic conferences expect theoretical frameworks I don't possess." "That's exactly why they want you," Rojas replied, her scientific training now enhanced by appreciation for practical innovation. "You've proven that unconventional approaches can solve problems that traditional methods can't address. The academic community needs to hear that perspective." Jake Morrison entered the office carrying security briefings that had become routine since the corporate espionage investigation. His military background had proven valuable in implementing comprehensive security protocols that protected both personnel and intellectual property. "The FBI completed their investigation of Alex O's activities," he reported, his expression carrying the satisfaction of successful counterintelligence operations. 18 months of corporate espionage, involving 3 competitors and coordinated efforts to manipulate stock prices through artificial crisis creation. Dallas processed this information through her military intelligence training, recognizing patterns of sophisticated hostile operations that resembled state-sponsored industrial espionage. Any indication of ongoing threats? The investigation identified several other technology companies facing similar coordination between internal sabotage and external financial pressure, Morrison replied. The FBI is treating this as part of a broader pattern of corporate warfare that has national security implications. General Hayes appeared in the office doorway, her presence still triggering complex emotions in Dallas. The general's visits had become monthly consultations on expanding military-civilian technology collaboration, but they also served as reminders of the military community Dallas had left behind. "Sergeant, the Pentagon is requesting your consultation on quantum communications for forward-deployed units," Hayes announced, her tone carrying both professional respect and personal concern. It would involve temporary deployment to testing facilities, working with active military units. The opportunity represented everything Dallas had thought she'd left behind: direct military service, responsibility for soldier safety, and the kind of high-stakes technical work that had defined her career for 20 years. But it also triggered anxiety about returning to environments that had caused her psychological trauma. "I need time to consider it," Dallas replied, her voice carrying the strain of internal conflict. "The work here at Nexus is expanding rapidly, and I'm still adjusting to civilian corporate leadership responsibilities." Tommy stepped forward, his protective instincts recognizing the pressure Dallas was facing from multiple directions. "Maybe the question isn't whether you can handle more responsibility, but whether you're taking care of yourself while handling what you already have." The comment highlighted the central challenge of Dallas's new position. Professional success was creating opportunities that exceeded her psychological comfort zone, forcing her to balance career advancement with trauma management and personal well-being. As the various conversations concluded and people departed for the board meeting, Dallas found herself alone in her office, looking out at Silicon Valley while contemplating choices she'd never expected to face. The quantum cores hummed steadily in the lab below, their resilient blue light representing technology that bridged military necessity and civilian innovation. 6 months earlier, she'd been invisible, anonymous, safely isolated from the kind of responsibility that had defined and ultimately damaged her military career. Now she was central to technology development that had national security implications, managing teams of brilliant people, and facing opportunities that could reshape both her own life and the broader relationship between military and civilian technical communities. The success was real, but so was the ongoing challenge of integrating her military identity with civilian purpose. The aftermath was proving as complex as the crisis itself. The aftermath was proving as complex as the crisis itself. 6 months later, Dallas stood in the quantum lab that had become her second home, watching David Kim lead a team of new engineers through the military hardening protocols she'd developed. The space had evolved beyond its original elegant theoretical design into a robust operational facility that could withstand the kind of sophisticated attacks that had once brought Nexus to its knees. "Remember," David instructed the newest team members, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd learned practical engineering from military professionals. "Elegant solutions that fail under stress are inferior to crude solutions that work consistently. Master Sergeant Joyce taught us that resilience trumps perfection." Dallas smiled at hearing her military philosophy integrated into civilian technical training. The cultural transformation at Nexus had extended far beyond quantum computing, influencing everything from project management to personnel evaluation. Success was now measured by operational effectiveness rather than theoretical beauty. Director Joyce, one of the new engineers, approached with a quantum processing anomaly that would have caused panic 6 months earlier. "We're seeing minor coherence fluctuations in processing matrix 7. Standard protocols suggest immediate shutdown for diagnostic evaluation." Dallas examined the data with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to distinguish between critical failures and manageable operational variations. Fluctuations are within acceptable military hardening parameters. Document the anomaly, implement compensatory protocols from backup matrices, and continue operations. This is exactly the kind of resilience the system was designed to provide. The response demonstrated how thoroughly her battlefield experience had transformed Nexus's approach to technology management. Problems that once triggered crisis responses were now handled through robust backup systems and graceful degradation protocols. Dr. Carla Rojas entered the lab carrying the latest prototype specifications for quantum-hardened satellite communications. Their professional partnership had evolved into genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to practical innovation that served both civilian and military applications. The Navy's submarine quantum communication tests exceeded all performance benchmarks. Rojas reported, her scientific excitement evident. Underwater quantum entanglement maintained coherence for 72 hours despite electromagnetic interference that would have destroyed conventional systems. Dallas felt satisfaction at the successful application of her military hardening principles to naval operations. Each successful deployment validated her unconventional approach while extending quantum technology into operational environments that theoretical designs couldn't survive. The Air Force wants to accelerate their satellite network deployment, she replied, consulting her project management displays. But we need to complete terrestrial testing before moving to orbital applications. Military communications require proven reliability. Marcus Kane appeared in the lab's doorway, his leadership style now reflecting the collaborative approach he'd learned during the crisis. His relationship with his daughter Lisa had strengthened considerably, influenced by her perspective on workplace equity and his newfound appreciation for diverse talents. Dallas, the Pentagon briefing is scheduled for next week, he announced, though his tone suggested partnership rather than corporate hierarchy. General Hayes wants to discuss expanding our military-civilian collaboration program to other technology companies. The prospect of sharing her military hardening methodology with broader civilian industry represented the kind of systemic change Dallas had never imagined influencing. Her unique experience bridging military necessity and civilian innovation was creating opportunities to transform how America's technology sector approached national security challenges. I'll prepare the technical presentation, Dallas replied, though she still felt some anxiety about high-level military briefings. The methodology is proven, but scaling implementation across multiple companies will require standardized training. Protocols. Tommy Reeves entered the lab carrying coffee for the evening shift workers, his promotion to facilities manager, allowing him to implement the kind of worker-centered policies that reflected his union organizing background. His presence reminded Dallas that organizational transformation required supporting people at every level, not just technical innovation. Dallas, that reporter from MIT Technology Review, is here for the follow-up interview, Tommy announced. She wants to discuss how military veterans can contribute to civilian technology development. Dallas felt the familiar tension between her preference for privacy and her growing recognition that public visibility could benefit other veterans struggling with civilian career transitions. Her story had become a model for organizations seeking to tap military expertise that traditional hiring practices often overlooked. Schedule 30 minutes, she replied, her comfort with media attention gradually improving through practice and preparation. I want to emphasize that my experience isn't unique. There are thousands of veterans with technical skills that civilian companies need. Lisa Kane approached from her workstation, where she'd been developing educational materials that helped bridge military and civilian technical cultures. Her gap-year internship at Nexus had evolved into meaningful work that influenced her college, application essays, and career planning. Dallas, the Veterans Technology Networking Group, wants you to speak at their monthly meeting, Lisa reported, her natural empathy recognizing the importance of peer support for military to civilian transitions. There are a lot of former Signal Corps and cybersecurity specialists who are struggling to find civilian positions that use their skills. The request highlighted Dallas's growing role as an advocate for veteran employment in technology sectors. Her success at Nexus had created opportunities to influence how civilian companies approached military talent acquisition, but it also added responsibilities that sometimes felt overwhelming. Jake Morrison appeared with security briefings that had become routine since implementing comprehensive threat assessment protocols. His investigation techniques had been adopted by other technology companies facing similar corporate espionage. Challenges. The quarterly security assessment shows no anomalous activity, he reported, his voice carrying satisfaction at successful threat prevention. The military hardening protocols have created resilience that extends beyond technical systems to organizational security culture. Dallas nodded approvingly, recognizing that technical security required human security awareness that most civilian organizations didn't naturally possess. Military approaches to operational security had proven as valuable as technical hardening. In protecting Nexus's innovations, General Hayes contacted the lab through secure communications, her monthly consultations having become collaborative planning sessions for expanding military-civilian technology partnerships. Her recognition of Dallas's unique value had opened doors throughout the Pentagon for similar collaboration opportunities. Sergeant Joyce, Hayes's voice carried through the lab's speakers, the Joint Technology Committee wants to formalize your consulting relationship with multiple military branches. It would involve regular travel to different installations, working with various technical teams. The opportunity represented a return to direct military service that Dallas had never expected to consider. But it would be service enhanced by civilian experience, combining her military expertise with the organizational leadership skills she developed at Nexus. General, I'd be honored to contribute, Dallas replied, her voice carrying confidence that had grown through successful civilian leadership. But I'd want to maintain my position at Nexus. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.